Making another video. Sorry, try to keep this one a little shorter. We'll try. See how it goes. It is kind of a good subject, though. This is, I don't know what he goes, Pierrot's questions and doors of perception. This part might be worth something. Perception. So he starts off with some sort of babble about, when we're young, our vision is upside down and our brain has to orient us to the correct way to see the world. This makes sort of sense, right? I mean, the lens creates an upside down image. Your brain has to figure out that gravity works this way, not that way, and so it turns it around. That it's not coherent to the reality. And then the process is on. You start connecting to the world perceptually. Now let's understand that there's some basic impulses, basic ones, temperature, roughness to the touch, bad smells or tastes, the sexual desire and hunger, thirst. These basic mechanisms will create impulses in your perceptions of value. You'll see value in water when you're thirsty. You'll see value in food when you're hungry. Value in pussy when you're horny. You'll have a perception, an association, a connection that creates a sensation that tends to attract you to the thing or tends to repulse you to another thing based on these sensations and these associations. And then sensibly you go through life and you create more and more of these associations through experience with things. Now the trick with humans is obviously we're not doing this in some sort of gross mechanical way like an animal. You can see it's associations, and you can see some of them are almost permanent. A dog gets hit with a broom when it's a puppy, and for the rest of its life, it'll have broom fear. And it'll bite people because of a broom, or it'll run because of a broom. It'll react. It'll emotionally react because it can't understand a greater, bigger context. It can only do this in this very crude, visceral way. Its perceptions are limited to what is in permanent life experience. All those life experiences become bigger to the dog because it doesn't read books and it doesn't get a flood of other information. Now we as humans are flooded with associations from movies, associations from personal interactions with human beings, stories being told, books being read. He's very big on sci-fi, mumbo jumbo. It's more like sci-horror or whatever. But anyway, whatever gets you off through perception. So clearly it's a very interesting subject of what we understand when we interact with the world. Is this a personal reaction, or is this a coherent, sensible reaction? Now, I would argue that everybody's sensible reaction to being afraid of being blown up in a gas explosion, or being afraid if they see a tsunami coming, these are common, understood things that everybody's experience is going to be the same. Nobody has, like, I don't know. I mean, you can find some exceptions, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, generally speaking, we can say there are certain things that scare people. Brain tumor, disease, elephant man disease, some kind of, nobody is not afraid. Nobody is not horrified by certain things. And that's where this guy goes all wrong, because he wants to say that everything has no real, in its nature, describability in any kind of value sense. Nothing. So again, he's basically saying nail in the eye is the same as a cupcake. He's saying that's his philosophical understanding of the world. He's saying that, oh no, perceptually, I have bad experiences with nail in the eye, and that has prejudiced me against nail in the eye, but I'm only prejudiced against it. It's not a sensible correlation between nail in the eye, harm, and that being in the bad category forever and completely. No, I'm just a personal bigot. That's his kind of mush. And he does this all in the context of quoting Lovecraft and all these other dark fantasy writers, who are basically illustrating how, if you really look at life, it's a piece of shit when you really look at it. Okay, Monty Python. That's what, that the more you take away your desires, your ego, you take away your ego from sport. Sport is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's laughably ridiculous when you take away your positive associations and your sense of heroicness and blah blah, all that ego projection you put on top of it. Just like a box of chocolates to the woman or something. That's all her. Take away her love of chocolate, and what is it? It's a silly waste of money. All the definitions of what is considered romantic and all that kind of, these are all just silly associations. Style, all this aesthetic crap. All this aesthetic crap is just based on the fact that you're conditioned by a culture. I don't find anything too aesthetically cool about that whole Muslim roundy thing with the gold on it. I think it looks like shit. But that's because I personally, our tile walls, I really don't like tile walls. I mean, it just creeps me the fuck. It's like a bathroom, fuck it. I don't have any good associations with bathrooms, so yeah, fuck tiles on walls. That's just me, right? But, and we can just clearly say that repulsion or that irritation or that lack of symmetry or that lack of connection is just something personal. But then we know that if I'm looking at a person suffering with cancer, it's not a projection. I'm not projecting substance and meaning on that. And I'm certainly not doing it in some just cultural way. I'm doing it in some sensible way. So again, this is back to the argument that as intelligent organisms, we're capable of understanding a much deeper thing than just the surface. We can understand what something represents. We can see a whole history. I look at a tree, and I just don't look at it the same way I looked at it when I was 10 years old. Because now I can understand a tree as part of evolution. I can understand it as a metaphor for evolution. And then I can start to see billions of years, hundreds of millions of years of sentient creatures chasing each other for food. And I can see that as kind of bloody and nasty and ugly. And so now this tree, which is, it has nothing to do with this conversation, but it's become a symbol for me. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to be reminded, to have that context, to understand that that is the context. There is no pretty thing in nature for me without understanding that there's a price paid for anything that might be aesthetically wonderful or beautiful. Because I'm capable of doing that through my intelligence, not personal experience. I don't have a personal experience with evolution. I don't have much of a personal experience with trees. But I'm able to understand them. And I'm able to, through that process, I will have an emotional reaction eventually, because it's connected to things I do know. I do understand. I do understand pain, and I'm capable of understanding that painful or unpleasant or repulsive or obnoxious or misery events have a similarity to them. I mean, liver cancer versus pancreatic cancer versus kidney cancer. I mean, I can understand that it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I can understand that they're all a miserable event. I can understand the idea of misery. So anyway, so that's context. So the thing is to just understand ourselves as this reactive mechanism that is just an animal. Okay, we have these innate sensations, tendencies, tendency to associate. We have tendencies to associate. We can understand those. And then we can understand some of them you can change, and some of them you can't. You can't change the hunger thing. You probably can't change the horny thing. You can change maybe a little bit what makes you horny, but only a little bit, because some of them are hardwired, some of them are in hard conditioning, and some are soft conditioning. It's sort of a very important concept in our existence, is understanding the addictions, the attachments that you have that you aren't really going to be able to change without completely bludgeoning your psychology with a retraining. And those that are so subtle, like your love of baseball or something, I would argue, or meat eating, or lots of things, they can be easily migrated. Your sense, your affiliation, your attraction or repulsion can be changed through just perception, through just an understanding a re-understanding and reconnection of objects to other events and a deeper understanding of a greater or grander purpose. For example, I could show you a 6-year-old child suffering. Let's just even say being run over by a car. And I could give you certain knowledge that that event prevented 1 million children from being run over. Now your first reaction is one of just the obvious negative. And then but once you understand this greater positive and the magnitude of the greater positive, your perception of the event will change. You'll still mourn, you'll still be grieving, but your grieving will be less. It's sort of like if your father dies when you're 15, it will be one kind of an emotional event because you might think your father was robbed of his life, robbed of his future, robbed of some accomplishment, or that your father dies at a grand age, and you feel he got his shot. He got his share. So it's just this perception. It's the same event happening at different times, and there's just the only thing that's different is whether you feel, you sense something completed or something left undone. And that's something we understand psychologically. And so therefore the same event can become a different event based on how you look at it. They got their shot, they didn't get their shot. They had a good life, they had a crappy life. Will change the event itself. And that's through understanding, once again. And understanding, I think, there are many elements that are simple and quite obvious, not in the mechanism of our impulses. We can understand our desires and why they exist, and then we can understand that there is in the reality, there are events that are happening. There is no free lunch. Work is unpleasant. Some work is horrible. Some work is, will kill you. We can understand these things.
What if you could do that without dropping acid? What if you could do it in a disciplined fashion? Well, as I say, I'm into Tantra, and that's what they say you can do.
Right, so he's saying he's going to the depths of reality. And, I'd obviously say, quite obviously, you're not even coming close to getting it right. Why do you think these other people described it as a horror, and you're laughing about it? Clearly, you're not doing it right. Yeah, clearly.
Teach yourself how to do that. That's neither here nor there, though.
Well, you brought it up, asshole. And again, I will say that if you think you're enlightened, yeah, you got that wrong too. Like many things, it's another one of the things you've gotten wrong. You're exactly the opposite.
The issue that
you are so blind.
Like to point out is things like value. When you're placing value on reality.
What does that even mean, right? Placing value on reality, right there. What does that mean? What exactly are you talking about? Obviously, no one places value on reality. It's a silly way to say the sentence. Are you placing value on elements of reality and saying there are good events and bad events in the universe? Wow, that's going too far. That's projection. That's a bigotry. That's a bias. No, it's logical. If you understand what sentience is, and you understand the difference between a nail in the eye and a cupcake, all you really have to do is understand that there's a dramatic difference between a sentient organism having a nail in its eye and eating a cupcake. If you don't understand that there's a substantial difference between sentient organism eating cupcake and sentient organism with nail in the eye, then yes, I have no help for you. You are too fucking stupid you're too stupid. Just too stupid to be called anything but the stupidest fucking thing there is. You're stupider than a stick, because a stick doesn't have it that wrong. Having no philosophy is better than having one so fucking far from reality.
You are the one that's doing it. It's, if you're putting emphasis or bias or anything like that, or if there is actual value on any of the attributes that you see in anything out there that you're perceiving, you are projecting that.
All right. So what are you going to say, right? He's saying there's no difference between them, essentially. So by essentialness, there's no difference. So if I create a universe with only one living sentient being in it, there's no difference between creating that one sentient being with a nail in its eye or creating that one sentient being eating cupcakes forever. So it has a nail in its eye forever or it has cupcakes forever. There's no difference, logically. I would have to show up to say there was a difference. And then I'm just doing it by some bias. The difference isn't in the circumstance itself. The very nature of the circumstance doesn't have a value component. That's what this crazy, insane bastard is saying. I mean, I just don't understand how you people can do this. How can you so fundamentally break reality and play a game like saying suffering is no different than a color. It doesn't matter what color you like or what color you don't like. It's all the same. Blah blah blah. How can you do that to suffering? How can you be that stupid? It's a mechanism created by nature for the very purpose of creating something bad, repulsive, obnoxious. Run the fuck away. Run the fuck away at the speed of light squared. That's what nature created, something obnoxious to you. And you can't understand that would be a bad thing? Shit.
Stephen King's juxtaposition was, in my experience, very apropos. Here's a guy in a very pleasant surrounding, sandy beachside cabin. I think it's in Florida, but it could have been in New England where he likes to write. And, one of these quaint seaside towns that's actually quite civilized with, doctors and policemen and stores and everything. You're not really that far from civilization, but you kind of are because it's a nice place.
Sorry, I thought he was going to get to something real here. So he's just redescribing this book story about some guy who aliens are looking through his hand because he's got eyeballs in it. He's in a beach house somewhere or something. I don't know. And the aliens say, gee, that's an ugly hell. Man, these earthlings have bad style.
And here's some aliens zapped in there looking at it like they've just been dropped into the pits, the depths of hell itself. It's this horrific place with corners and geometry that just looks...
Oh, yeah, whatever. So you think this is what a life in other... Say a life evolved on somewhere else, an intelligent life, sentient life. You really think that sentient life would sit there and not realize those are just style differences. The aliens wouldn't have... The aliens can actually put eyeballs in your hand, and they're not smart enough to know the difference between a subjective matter of taste and a meaningful and substantial value reality. Oh, come on. Look, they're playing cricket. How lame. You think they really do that? Because they're not playing double cricket? I mean, oh, come on.
Terrible, and it's inhabited by monsters and danger and alienness and things that I just want...
Well, whatever. I don't know how you got all this. I mean, I'm not going to bother reading the book, but, I don't know exactly how Stephen King was able to make this all so horrible, but whatever. I don't know what fanciful descriptions he used to make it sound like this is actually that horrible. I think I could look at an alien city without throwing up. I really don't think it's going to be that bad. I mean, I could imagine I could even imagine slime people, or even mucus people. And it's not going to bother me that much.
Kill because they're so horrible and threatening and they shouldn't even exist. That's what he puts into the mind.
Yeah, well, it's all science fiction, mumbo jumbo bullshit, isn't it? I mean, I really just don't get it. I don't get it. Like when we draw aliens, right? Like Aliens, the movie Aliens, they got chrome fucking teeth, and then they got an extra little chrome mouthy thing that pops out. I'm just saying that the threat and the horror is quite obvious. It will eat. It'll push its little extra mouth into your head, and it'll bite your brains out. Now, I think that would be a sensible reaction to say, "Ooh, that's quite disgusting." Yes, pain, suffering. Or if it would, the whole idea of the parasitic organism, the maggot living inside of you and then popping out of you. I don't think there's any kind of thing we could describe as more horrible. So, I mean, that's how we describe a horrible alien. Now, if there was something about, what we're doing, now maybe the aliens, if they had a view, okay, and they could watch the little Chinese kid getting run over in the street, no one giving a fuck, and then they could flash over to a football game, and then they go back to the kid on the street, and they go back to the football game with all the crowd yelling, yeah, and they go back and forth, and they could say that no compute, okay, yeah, no compute. I can see that happening. Well, what you're describing again is you're just playing with fake, okay? You're not playing with philosophy. You're playing with silly stories. And yeah, it's all fun to play with silly stories, but I don't think they have anything to do with even fair analogies or fair metaphors of the real circumstance. Yeah, not even close.
The aliens, the Venusians, who are looking through his eyes. They're looking through his eyes, but they're the eyes that they have put on his hands, so they're kind of his eyes and their eyes, and they're projecting all the value that they...
So again, he's implying that because we can describe some kind of silly Venetians walking around in white robes who are afraid of dust, because we can make something like that up, that means that there's no such thing as rational harm. That there's no such thing as a rational perception of a value difference like cupcake and nail in your eye. Fuck.
That they place on everything into his mind, because he can see through their perceptions, the doorway of perception. He can see their biases, their value. He can see their projections onto everything. He can perceive their perceptions, something which I've often said is almost...
Well, yeah. So just to be clear, he's saying that subjective taste, like I personally like lemonade. You might like cherry drink or something. That is just as erroneous as cancer versus orgasm. That taste difference is nonsensical and meaningless.
Certainly impossible. But, in science fiction, nothing is impossible.
Yeah, but in science fact, there's lots of things that are impossible. Lots of things, there's no point in playing with it that way. There's some point in recognizing what we are, which is a impulsive organism, and that we're impulsive with diversity. We can be diversely impulsed. And that's a good thing to understand. But it's also good to understand that our brain, designed through evolution, was constructed with the functionality of getting it right so we could navigate the world. It didn't create a fake world for us to navigate. Yes, it made, for the average male, it made vagina a little extra special, and it makes certain things look yummy to eat, and it makes certain smells smell good, so it does taint our perception. But those taints are easily understood for what they are: personal biases, prejudices, preferences, subjective taste. And it gave us a brain that can now also understand that I understand pain. I've had pain. I can see it when it's in somebody else, and I can know it'd be a good thing if it wasn't in them. That's just a fact. I can know it. It's not a bias. It's not bullshit. It's a real, sensible perception. Something's in harm's way. You try to take it out of harm's way, because it's the rational thing to do. Fuck. Tard.
What does that say about our evaluation of the world?
Right, so we're all just being assholes, by his definition. We don't ever understand anything in any kind of accurate way, because to understand it accurately would mean there's no such thing as accurate from his perception. There's no difference between cupcake and nail in the eye.
In Pyro's hangout last week, we said, what would make the world good enough? How do you answer that?
No more dead kids can run over in the street. That's how I answer it. Come up with one thing you've done in your goddamn scummy life that would be worth giving a kid cancer, or giving a mouse cancer. You've no doubt financed that. You've no doubt financed the injection of some poor rodent with some horrid disease, or they're trying to make it invisible and they've injected it with some horrid chemical, and the mouse has suffered. You think you're worth it? I don't think you are. Just a fact. I don't think you're worth it. And that's why you suck, because you think you are. Smiling asshole. So anyway, this is what's wrong with human beings. I'm enlightened because I can ignore everything. Lead to paint enlightenment. Yeah, maybe I'll title the video that. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, I think this is a deeply important subject, understanding the difference between projected value. The values are impulses, project on the world. I love her. And the rational values, the rational understanding that I'm sentient, that's sentient, that's sentient. I have a broken leg bad, they have a broken leg bad, they have a broken leg bad. This is very different things. Valuing the welfare of sentient creatures is rational. Valuing pussy is hormonal. Big difference.